The Monday means test prophecy of the first week of August, and it brings us to a premiership commandingly won. David King, welcome.
Morning, G, for the last time for the year. Unbelievable, wasn't it? What a great weekend. What a spectacular watch for a neutral fan. That was as good as you'll see. So
the epiphany in what you track, it was there. It had revealed itself by about round 18, and it carried emphatically through.
Yeah, well, Whateley, which you all know now from Champion Data, and I we've been fumbling around for 18 months or so with what's important, what to track, and I think we're getting to the point where not everything's bulletproof, and it's not one stat. It's a culmination of a whole heap of things you value. And in the end, it comes down to performance, obviously, to win these big games. But if your strategy and your structures are in good place and you're in reasonable health, and these two teams coming into this weekend were in similar situations regarding health and form and all those sorts of things. So in the end, it comes down to what you value, and we probably valued the ability to move the ball, the ability to win contests outside of clearance greater than most, and all roads led to Geelong, really. Now, the Swans are ahead of time. You know, they will be like a Geelong, you would think, in the next 2 to 3 years and get that opportunity. But as we saw on the weekend, it's probably just 12 months ahead of time, isn't it?
Yes, I guess that was the risk in all of it, and they weren't seasoned enough for what came. So the King's Gambit, we're trying to sort of measure how great a premiership this is.
Well, 2022 is the culmination of excellence. And I've just put a 5 points of perfection for the Cats. As simple as this. The list build, the strength and conditioning department have had an unbelievable season. We'll break it down in a moment. An overhauled game plan and overhauled roles within that game plan. Unique strategies that absolutely comes back to the senior coach. And then leadership. In the end, leadership gets you over the line in these big games, whether they're off-field leaders or on-field leaders. You would have to say every one of Geelong's most important people stood tall. So I think there's a whole host of ways you can look at it, but I don't know if there's one area at Geelong where you could question. That at any stage over the last 12 months you've thought, no, that's letting them down or that's going to fail them. So this has been absolutely the culmination of excellence in 2022.
So let's use the words of Chris Scott to tease some of that out, and then you can flesh out each category. So the passage of 12 months.
Yeah, and there's a lot to break down there, isn't there? I mean, I think there's a fair bit of bravery involved in all of these decisions. To overhaul your game plan when you've been so successful and just run aground, it's easy to say, oh, hang on, we've been 3 goals up, 4 goals up, just short of half-time in a grand final and just short of half-time in a prelim. Do we really need to make these changes? Can you imagine sitting in that match committee that day that they've had the big powwow and reset the whole strategy and being the first voice to say what you're doing's not working, Chris? Like that, you have to be well schooled with what you're bringing to the table as soon as that's declared, because I think the overhauling of the structural side of the game, it covered their flaws. So if I said to you, Gerard, Geelong have lost this grand final, give me the 3 reasons why they lost. I think you'd say, well, a hole in the ruck again. There's a hole in the ruck. So talking from 6 months ago, if you like. So they do this unique thing with Reece Stanley where he rolls back. So the second port would probably be, we've got a young centre-half back. Maybe in a big game he gets taken to the cleaners and someone puts 4 or 5 goals on him, and that's the gap. So what we'll do, we'll go with our ruck, we'll roll him behind the ball, we'll give some support as an extra and free up our centre-half back so he can be an intercept marker. He's become marquee. Stanley's role then allows blitz halves to be an extra midfielder. They get more run through the middle. They use less rotations in the middle than their opposition week on week. They stay powerful. They stay healthy. And then forward of centre, we have Tom Hawkins take the ruck work inside the forward 50 because we want to keep Stanley behind the ball, and he becomes the most dominant ruckman inside the forward 50 in the competition. So that in isolation, to me, if you go back and assess the weekend's game, the grand final, the biggest game of them all, so all strategies, if they're not quite bulletproof, they get exposed. I think it was worth 7 or 8 goals. I mean, it was worth the first 2 goals of the game with Tom Hawkins just doing what he does. So I think the strategy side of it, is an absolute boom for them in 2022, and then embracing error, not worrying about having to play safe footy, having to play perfect footy. And those games we talk about where they were 3.5, 4 goals up, just short of half time in grand final, it had 1 or 2 skill errors that shifted the whole momentum of those games against Richmond, and that was all she wrote. 10 minutes later, Dusty's gone crazy, game over, because they try to play perfect footy. So now they play this chaotic, go forward, take territory, take risk brand that when it works big, and when it fails, they're still good enough to cover. So I think that that decision in itself would probably make Chris lay in bed last night and say, I wish I'd have done this 4 years ago. What would that have meant? So that's the negative side of it. The positive of this is that it's worked and worked big. I think Geelong have played the best quality football this year, by far. And we've talked, I think, for long periods about Melbourne, we've talked for long periods about Sydney and Brisbane and all the teams that have, Collingwood, that have played some pretty scintillating footy out of the back line and ball movement. But in terms of the complete package, that they have been bulletproof defensively and just exceptional ball in hand.
Did you want to flesh out those categories?
Well, the list build, it takes a brave coach to stay down this path with the age profile of this group and just keep going to the well and finding different ways. So I think there's a risk in that. And if they didn't win this premiership, we'd be saying, hey, Chris Scott, what are you doing? Look at this old list. You've known, you haven't won one for 10, 11 years. What are you doing? We would have questioned the decision of the not just Chris, but the list management group. The risk to spend 3 first round, I'm going to keep coming back to this, Jeremy Cameron. So you've got to be brave enough to say, we are going all in to win it. The guy's 26, 27 when they picked him up. So the strength and conditioning department, now we don't often talk about this. They've been so healthy all year. And then you've got to take some risks late in the season to rest some players. So they say, okay, we'll do this. Can you just think of the conversations in the back office? This week I want to rest him, and then the next week I want to rest him. We don't want to look arrogant, but, we're going to have to do this to get there. Now, the time on ground stuff we've spoken a lot about, but I think it's worth talking about. Their midfield, I might just go through some numbers. So their midfield, again this weekend, have played significantly less football than their counterparts. So at half-time of the game, when the game was over at half-time, Atkins and Guthrie had played 40 minutes, Selwood had played 42, and Danger had played 43. Warner, in comparison, had played 40, same as Atkins and Guthrie. And then it goes to Rowbottom, 50, Parker, 54, Mills, 55. So on average, that's about 9 minutes more per player. Midfield versus midfield. Yep. Now, that was always going to come home to roost. And if you look in the second half, they couldn't go, Sydney. That third quarter, they couldn't move. Now, I know they've had a tough campaign, and last week's game maybe was their grand final. And maybe they're ahead of, they're a year ahead of schedule. But in this given game, the strength and conditioning department had an influence. And they've been doing this for weeks. So this is not just because of a one-off idea or a one-off notion. So I think that's a major factor. And then leadership. It's a simple word that we throw out there, but tell me one leader that didn't perform near his best on the weekend for Geelong. They were outstanding. No matter whether you look at Hawkins, who gave them a couple of settlers early, and you need them. You need one of your big presence men to say, okay, we're okay here, guys. And then Danger doing what he did in the middle. Selwood has such a great start to the game. Isaac Smith, who's been a bits and pieces player for them, regularly and not really meant to be a separating type player, does what he does. And down back, you get the security of the old campaigners and Bewes and Stewart, just positioning these young guys. So I think leadership you have to talk about. The unique strategies, I talked about the ruck work, I talked about Jeremy Cameron's function a lot. They're kicking inside 50, 17 marks inside 50 again on the weekend. So everything they do has an impact on the scoreboard, whether it's denying the opposition or scoring themselves. This has been one of the great coaching performances that we've ever seen. And I know that we've been hard on Chris over the years, but they haven't played like this before. This has been fantastic.
And one game too many for the Swans, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll highlight some times through the course of our chat this morning, but I haven't seen Luke Parker as lacklustre as what I saw him on the weekend. I haven't seen Heaney look almost disinterested at time. Papley didn't have the gas, and on the flip side of that is they were challenged to be physical at every point, and they failed that test. It'll be a brutal review, and they will have to review this one. This is not one you just dust over. Sometimes we talk about, do you review the grand final being such a heavy loss? What does that do to the group? I think you have to watch this one and say, what did Geelong do to us? Because we're going to need to do that to someone else down the path. And there'll be some awkward viewing. McInerney, Papley, Warner on occasion, Parker. This will be the worst review Luke Parker watches for a while. McCartan, both McCartans. Wouldn't even know Paddy played on the weekend. Franklin, Reid. You just keep going through and ticking them off. They looked brittle. Tackles broken everywhere. 11 tackles broken for the game. AFL average about 7 or 8. So they stepped through them. They challenged them in every way, Geelong, and no matter where you look, it was men versus boys, and it was evident early. And I think that's what the big bodies of Dangerfield do to you. So if you can't compete with the big frames, you're not going to win those big finals. So there's a lot of scope for improvement at Sydney, but we're talking about guys that have played 6, 8, 10 years of footy. So they failed the test.
A special guest on the Monday Means Tests. Can I introduce him as Premiership player Patrick Dangerfield? Pat,
yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
The
Morning,
sun's
boys.
bluer.
Morning.
The sun's brighter. Is the world just a little bit different?
It is. It's nice. I'm actually in the car driving. My father-in-law's driving me down to the festivities that kick off this morning. I think there's going to be some fun to be had.
Tell us what's been the most memorable part of graduating to the class of Premiership players for you?
Probably just the job's done. It's complete versus the every other season that's close but no cigar. That feeling of total satisfaction that everything that we set out to achieve, we have been able to do. And it's been so close to so many years, and to finally come up triumphant, it's hard to describe.
Is it as good as you thought it might be?
Yeah, it is, and more. We played, and it always felt like over the last 6-8 weeks that we were just continually building and getting better and better. And it was a really tight game against Collingwood. You got to have those sometimes, and I felt like we almost perfected what would been setting out to achieve this year. And it was such a well-rounded game, and just so proud of our guys to be able to execute on the biggest stage. And the town's so proud of everyone involved. They're the special parts.
At what point of the game did you allow yourself to realise that you were going to win?
At half-time when we came in, I remember I was nervous about the first 5 minutes of the third because it can go the two ways. They get a couple of quick ones, all of a sudden the margin's back to 24 and it's game on. But if we start it well, and if we get it forward, and if we put them under the pump, we can shut the door pretty quickly. And then all of a sudden, in the first 5 minutes, we were able to hit the scoreboard 3 times. And that's when it's like, we're not going to let up, and it's going to be mightily tough to get back. And, that shut the door on the game effectively. And I suppose that's why they call it the Premiership quarter, isn't it? Is
it satisfying to play so well in the game that matters most?
Yeah, I think, I would have been totally stoked to have had one possession and win. But it is wonderful to contribute. And to be honest, that's the whole team. I mean, it's been the mantra this year, but for everyone to have, their moments throughout the game, that's why it was just such a well-rounded performance, because it was so even from so many. And that's been the hallmark of our game this year, and it's just been so wonderful to be able to execute that in the big moments.
Were you at Jez's farm on Saturday night when you partied till the cows came home?
No, definitely not at Jez's farm. He disappeared for a couple of hours. He needed to get a few hours sleep. So everyone talks about him being this stayer, Gerard, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. He had to actually return to home base for a while, whereas a few of us continued to push on.
And so today, is it dress up day?
It's been a big couple of hours this morning. So, everyone talks about preparation being the key to good performance. Well, I feel like the performances are only going to improve today, and I think we'll see that in an hour's time.
Has it hit home to you, Paddy, what it means to the rest of the Geelong faithful, the fans, the family, the past players, all the people that would have been, fronting up and congratulating you over the last 48 hours? Has that hit home, what it means to them?
Probably not totally, to be honest, Kingy. It's just been such a whirlwind. It's something that you try for and, put all this work in throughout, my entire career and all the players that played all their entire careers. And there's been, varying levels of success that each player's had. It's Joel's fourth, it's Isaac Smith's fourth, Tom Hawkins' third. And then for the vast majority of us, it's our first. And, to toil away for a long time and then to finally get a taste of it, understand why everyone talks about, how sweet it just is.
I'm going to ask you again because I'm not convinced you gave Gerard the correct answer, and it's okay if you say I was awesome. you had 27, 9 clearances. Some of your centre bounce work was just fantastic. What was it like in game knowing that you were one of the prime movers? You were the reason that you got that 6-goal lead at half time?
It's nice. It's always nice to play well. You always want to contribute. So it's always about the collective, but the collective, requires individuals to play their role. And more than just that, it can't be a cop-out of just play a role. It's got to be, you're there to do some good stuff. And to be able to do that and chip in and help out in that way is really satisfying. Individually at different stages, we've each had our knockers. I've had a few, and it's not about proving them wrong, but it's just nice to do it for each other, to get it right, to kick the goal, and just to have the foot on the throat, and it's just a great feeling.
And maybe a closing word that you've never hidden your admiration for Joel Selwood. And so I think 2022 will be remembered for Robbie Williams and Joel Selwood. Is just your thoughts towards the way it all came together on that day, the tenderness of the man and the ruthlessness of the athlete.
He for us, he's our captain. He's everything that you want in a leader. It's hard to describe what he means to us, and personally to me, what he's done for my career. I have nothing but the highest of praises for Joel. His will to compete and to be our spiritual compass of just ultra competitiveness. He's a champion in every way. We've been a successful club, but we have a large part has been, due to his leadership along with Chris. They're such special people.
Looking back now, it's been the perfect season with an unbelievable finish for you and the team. Can you let us in a little bit as to whether there was a theme, a mantra for the season? I know that all these things come out generally in hindsight. We'd love you to see if you can share some of that with us. Has there been something you've tracked, a theme that's driven you all?
I suppose I've spoken a bit about Michael Gervais and just his philosophy around sport and the moment and the next moment, and really that's all that's important. It is the next moment, and we've been so focused on that being our mantra around not drifting too far from that. Keep that in the forefront of your mind, and I think if we've stuck to that by and large, and that's meant that we've embraced it, but we haven't drifted, and our performance, I think, has reflected that.
And are there any words that will live with you from the day, either pre-match, half-time, three-quarter time? It's not a thriller at that stage. Is there any one phrase that rattles around in your brain from the day?
Oh, not particularly. It's such a whirlwind, and it's not exactly the most. It's not a line to write home about. But when Joel came out and said at three-quarter time, well, I think we've won it, so let's just enjoy it. that was like, oh, this is going to happen. And, maybe you can allow yourself to smile and just lap it up. And that's what we're able to do. We played such a great game, and we gave ourselves that opportunity to enjoy it because we were ruthless for three quarters, and then we capped it off in the fourth.
Yes, as a couple of players said in the aftermath privately, Joel said at three-quarter time, we've won it, and just how unnerving that was.
Yeah, you don't really expect to hear that, but he went there, and how special.
How special indeed. Pat, thanks for sharing the season with us. Enjoy today, enjoy the celebrations that go with it, and well done.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Patrick Dangerfield, Premiership player.
So good.
All right, let's get into it. The first quarter of the grand final. 6-5 to 1 goal at quarter time. Kingy, what's in your notes?
Well, pretty simple. Don't get beaten by what you know. Tom Hawkins has been going to those 450 stoppages as a ruckman for 2-3 years now and trying to grab the ball out of the ruck and snap goals. So to be beaten in that manner twice in a row, Tom Hickey has a lot to be responsible for here in the horrendous start that the Swans put forward, and so too McCartan, his direct opponent, too far away. If you're going to be there to clamp him once he takes possession, be there. Don't be 2 metres off. Don't be 3 metres off. Don't be half asleep. Because it was the start the Cats needed. If you were going to get the Cats, you had to make them nervous. You had to put them in the same space Richmond had done in the previous years. So don't get beaten by what you know. Just put a few notes down here. Smith versus Goulden, men versus boys, where he broke through. Goulden didn't know how to handle it, didn't want to be physical, didn't want to know about it. Blitzarv's taking Parker into the deep water to the top of the goal face there, post centre bounce. Parker really didn't want to go back. He didn't really want to see it through. And that's the gap in the game. You look at the Swans looked apprehensive. I haven't seen Papley drop marks like he did. Franklin dropped another mark. McInerney went one-handed. Papley reaching at that centre bounce where Paddy said, no, this is full body. This is full commitment. This is a grand final. They're the gaps, And by contrast, so don't get beaten by what you know. Have a look at Bewes versus Papley at forward 50 stoppages. There's about 4 in a row in the first quarter where he's on high alert. He's not going to allow Papley to do his or ply his craft at forward 50 stoppages. So I thought that was the gap in the game. From a positive point of view, I thought Fox's start on Cameron was really strong. He had a fantastic first half, but a first quarter. But for me, the moment that sat with me from that first quarter was Patrick Dangerfield at centre bounces. The leg drive out of the middle, you thought, okay. If you're a Geelong player, you think, we're okay here. Our leaders are off to a flyer. Scoreboard's ticking over. I thought, to me, that was the best thing. And behind the ball with that Stanley roll and De Koning do what he did. De Koning owned everything. He just controlled the airways. And if you want to look at it from a statistical point of view, if you don't win one-on-one contests, you don't win games of football, okay? So the Cats, offensively, involved in 7. 3 wins, 3 neutrals, 1 loss. So that's really strong. That's good numbers. Defensively, involved in 5 one-on-ones. 4 wins, 1 neutral, no losses. So they controlled the air. They controlled the one-on-one battles. And then it just become a system game. And that's where the Cats that's been their weapon all year.
Who were your votes in the first quarter?
It was pretty tough, wasn't it? Like, it depends what you're a sweet or sour man, I had Dangerfield as best on ground because I thought his half a dozen disposals were authoritative, and they lit the fire, if you like. And then Isaac Smith is my 2-voter. He kicked the 2 goals. He had the 4 score involvements. I could have easily had Hawkins in there. I put De Koning in for 1. I thought he was really good early. Some of his spoiling back into that forward half, 3 intercept marks. Selwood had a fantastic start. But in the end, I've gone Dangerfield, Smith, De Koning, Hawkins and Selwood, really unlucky to miss out.
I had Selwood 3. I thought he was the most influential player of the first quarter. I thought it in real time and then watched I've watched the replay twice. I had De Koning.
That's a lie.
I had De Koning as 2.
5 times, I reckon.
I thought other than his first kick, which went out on the full, which could have been unnerving to a young man, is he controlled everything, as you referenced. And I did have Hawkins as 1, as if you kick those 2 goals as singular efforts from a boundary throw-in, and then I had Smith just beyond those. But I had Selwood, De Koning and Hawkins as my 3.
But I think when you got to come back to this game, why were Geelong so dominant? And they were so dominant because of between the arcs. Their midfield was clearly superior, plus 19 contested possessions in one quarter of football. That's not fronting up. Forward half contest plus 6, you normally get beaten in terms of head-to-head numbers. So, now I thought the midfield, and you're right, Joel was brilliant. He's probably stiff not to get a vote from me really, but I didn't want to leave De Koning out.
3-3 to 3-2. Geelong by a point in that second quarter to take a 36-point lead to the main break. David King, what are your notes on the second term?
Oh, there's a lot to take in the second term. I just want to quickly mention Gary Rowan's effort. He put a chase in that had 3 surge efforts to it. About the 14-minute to go mark if you're tracking back, and I just thought it was significant that's his function in the team. So he's performing his role, and we talked about the leaders earlier. The Hawkins, Blitzarve, Stanley ruck thing still causing confusion. The first forward 50 stoppage of the second quarter, no one mans up Blitzarves. They think he's going to be the ruck when all of a sudden McCartan's waiting for Hawkins. The ruck's taking Hickey's taking the ruck, so no one went to Blitzarves. So he's loose, easy clearance. So there's little things starting to work for Geelong. If you're a Geelong fan or player, you're starting to think, hang on, we got them here. They're a bit rattled. They're a bit confused. I don't know what they're doing. And then I just think Dangerfield's centre bounce clearance work was really evident in this. He made Luke Parker look like a schoolboy. He really did, particularly with that. There was one where he's basically crawling on the ground, surging after the ball, gets it out, goes to Atkins, goes to Stengel, mark inside 50 goal, and you go, wow, track that back. And then the next centre bounce, again, Parker versus Dangerfield, he does the same thing again, Paddy. And I'm thinking that's the heart and soul player of the Swans that you're now embarrassing. And what where to from there? I mean, there is no where to from there. He's your man. Warner was very good in this term. I thought he worked really hard from a Swans point of view. I thought he was admirable. There's no doubt about that. He created a couple of scores. But I think the big moment for me when you just knew that it was all unravelling, 7:40 to go, there was a contest on the wing, De Koning versus Reid. And Reid fell awkwardly. And it was almost like when he fell, he was trying to support his legs. And I thought, oh, he's not right. Now, I know he played another 6 or 7 minutes on the ground before he went off, but that action to me thought, oh, they've made a big mistake here. And after the game they've admitted to that. But I just think it was their brutality, the Cats in this second quarter, and Dangerfield and his leg drive. Yeah, that arcing run that he did. And the ball, he drives the ball inside 50. Hawkins gets the free kick. It's all because of sheer power. So I thought Dangerfield was huge again in this term.
I was shocked. So I had him for the 3 votes in this second quarter. I was shocked to go back and look at the stats and say he only had 4 disposals. God, they were 4 big disposals.
Yeah, what do you have? Yeah, 4 or 5. But they're all contested and they're all with power. So Geelong have scored 3-3 for the quarter. Yeah, 3-3 for the quarter, and he's involved in 2 goals, 1 of the 3-3. Yep. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about influence, aren't we?
Yep. We're
not really worried about accumulation, and I think that's Paddy's game in a nutshell. Everything that he did had a level of anger and authority about it.
What were your second quarter votes?
My second quarter votes, I gave Dangerfield again the 3, so I'm pretty biased here. I gave Stengel the 2. I thought his craft, he was really smart with some of his angles and his run. Again, he only had 4 disposals, but what he did hit the scoreboard. He kicked 2 goals in this term, and Warner, I snuck in for 1.
Yep, well, we've got the same 3.
Well, that's rare.
So I was messing around with Stengel, Hawkins, Smith, Duncan, Dangerfield, and Fox, Warner and Papley. And I went 3 Dangerfield, 2 Warner, one Stengel.
Yeah.
And Papley was right on the periphery of that as well. That was the quarter where he threatened to get going.
And again, I just want to touch on at halftime now, the gap in minutes played by these midfielders is going to be an issue. When you are absolutely out, 6-goal lead and you're out on your feet, 6 goals behind and out on your feet, halftime can't come quick enough, but then you've got to find the third term, Gerard. Unlikely.
6-3 to 1 behind in the decisive third term, David King.
I think the third term summed up by Geelong's pressure at 203, and we've talked about can Geelong handle the pressure, and is that the reason why there's an opportunity for Sydney? But they bought early pressure, particularly in the forward half. If you do the build up to the Duncan free kick, run down tackle on Tom McCartan for 40 seconds, it's just furious. It's just furious. And in the end, whether it was body clashes, whether it was absolute, just physicality, or whether it was tackle pressure, or whether it was just that harassment from front and back, it was just fantastic to watch. And I think once you saw that, you thought there's no way they're losing this game. Their ability to move the ball, Geelong, was brilliant. They only had 13 turnovers for the quarter, incredibly low number. Paddy McCartan behind the ball was ineffectual. They actually couldn't intercept mark the ball at all. And I know in the end they threw Paddy forward, but there are so many things to like about Geelong without the footy. I just talked then about their physicality. The Stengel fist just on a kick out, just to get a fist in, create a bit of a spill. Paddy wins it. I think he gives it back to him, and they get another opportunity. The switch across goal. Close is ready. He's ready. He's switched on. I'm not going to let you get the ball out of here. No, you can't just lob it Gubby Allen style across goal. Yep. We're going to get there. So those sorts of things were brilliant. 15-4 with the inside 50s for the quarter. 4 inside 50s for a quarter of football. Well, this is just them at their brutal best. Tom Stewart, he's tackle on Clark. He's supposed to be tagging him. Men versus boys stuff. When you really see it, close up. They walked the ball down the ground. The Cats, I thought they were really precise. They were really clever. And as I said, 5 goals 2 from 18 turnovers for Geelong. They've got the punish to their game. They had the answers. Win it back. And just play what's in front of you. Take territory. They kept surging the ball forward. It was basic stuff, but it had a level of anger and arrogance about it. The way they played, they knew they had them. That first 10 minutes, as Paddy touched on earlier with us, it just said, okay, not today. No, we're just going to be at our best without the footy and not allow you to breathe.
There's a phase. There's 6:45 left in the quarter, and the Swans have already had the turnover across the face of goal and the kick in, which jars clear and results as a goal. And they're trying to come out of defence, and Stevens is the ball carrier, and Kolodjasny's after him every step of the way, so he has to retreat. And the ball ends up back with Lloyd, who's such an accomplished and experienced defender, and he's spooked by his own shadow. And Kolodjasny's in and after him again. I think it's the sequence that leads up to the Stengel goal.
Yeah.
And it was just indicative of how they got progressively worked over by what was coming at them, the ferocity of what was coming at them, and the consistency of what was. It was overwhelming.
And they were true to who they are, who they have been all year. We talk about how good are you without the footy, how good are you with the footy. Their ability to absorb everything that the Swans could bring. When they had their opportunity, they conceded 1 point from turnover for the quarter. 1 point. Well, they just couldn't function, the Swans. They completely disarmed them, and that was it. They broke their spirit. They broke their will. And in the end, options dried up. They stopped running. They knew the result, which always happens in grand finals, I guess, once the result's known. But this was the toughest of third terms without the football.
Where do you want to put your votes here? It felt this is where Dangerfield and Smith really paired off, I thought.
Yeah, they're in my votes. I've given 1 to Paddy, 10 disposals for the quarter, 7 of those contested. He's just a brute. Everything else, had a level of physicality about it. 3 of those were clearances. I gave 2 to Smith, 10 disposals, 340 metres gained for the quarter. Like that, most players don't get that for a game. He's got that in the quarter, and he was the conduit. Like, up and down the ground that third quarter when they needed someone to just turn up to chip the ball to, it's him. He was terrific. I gave the 3 to Stengel. I thought his turn was really important. Like, it's not always noticeable when you're watching the game in real time, but his pressure is subtle. He got a hand in at the right times. He's always there to get a handball receive. He's a constant problem for you once you lose contact with him. He just drops in little holes. His ability to be used is really clever. So I thought he was best in the third term.
So I had Stengel, Blitzarves and Duncan. I just couldn't work out who to give the 1 to. Maybe I'll give it to Blitzarves.
Yeah.
And then I thought Smith was 2 and Dangerfield was 3 in that quarter. And that was toss of the coin, as they were equally damaging and influential. Stengel kicks 2 goals. So with Blitzarves and Duncan, I feel it's easier to sort of take the whole second half. So trying to work out who gets a vote in which quarter, I think it's clearer in that. So I'll give Blitzarves 1, Smith 2, Dangerfield 3 in that term.
See, most of Blitzarves, he has 8 disposals in the third term, but most of what he does is what he allows to happen behind the ball. I'd love to know how Geelong equate their games. What worth is that ruck position to Geelong's intercept game? You know, and he's a major player in this. Blitzarves. It's not necessarily what he does; it's what he allows. So we won't vote him as high as we should, and I'm sure the Geelong coaching staff have a greater understanding and appreciation.
What's in your final term notes?
Oh, so much to like. So a lot of the stuff we talk about is not necessarily going to show up in the stat sheets, but there's a moment. It's 15:27 is the time code. So the ball's driven in long to Franklin. This is defensive utopia for me. Ball comes in, high ball long. Stanley's already underneath it. He's prepared to take the contact. De Koning releasing to defuse, and Henry coming from the side. He was a nominal matchup for Franklin. All 3 cats. Let's just get this to ground. And then the follow-up. They win it at ground level. Warner wins it at ground level. He's about to snap a goal. And Buse just finds a way to get a hand in and smother the ball. Now, that is perfection. There's going to be a time where the opposition have their moments. And that was their moment. I know the game was blown and the score was already done. But just to keep finding and to say, no, we're not going to give you anything easy. We're not going to give you a score. Oh, that was fantastic. And I'm sure they'll show that on their review. Then you go to College Asney's chase on Stevens, 11:02. It's about standards at your football club, not that action. The forward 50 pressure, the build up to the Parfitt goal was just ridiculous. You know, we talked about some in the third quarter. Well, this was just as manic and just as crazy. But again, I think for me it always comes back to if you look at the centre bounce, 14:39 to go, Parker standing still and Dangerfield on the fly. Like, you just don't see it. And I feel like the Swans were out of gas. They were out of tickets. And if Grand Final was last week, they just weren't invested. They weren't at that absolute 100% buy-in like the Cats were. So I just felt like there's an opportunity there. And the same thing if you go to 3:30. Now, it's late in the game. I get that. It's late. The game's over. But Selwood versus Heaney at a forward half stoppage, he rolls off. Heaney just stands still. He gets embarrassed and exposed. The ball bobbles around a bit, and then it gets handball back to Selwood, who shapes a kick. But as he's shaping the kick, Stevens comes flying in from the side. Now he chooses to bump him. He gets the banana going, kicks the goal. And I just wonder if the roles were reversed. If it was Stevens that was going to have that opportunity to snap a goal, whether Selwood would commit full body for the smother. We know he would. And that's a gap in the game for me. It's a gap in where this guy's at and where he's got to get to. So they're learning lessons everywhere. But in the end, it was just the Cats first to move, first onto a loose ball. If you watch the game back again like we've clearly done, every time the ball come out of a stoppage situation, the first person to move, whether it be in the defensive end or the forward half of the ground, is a Geelong player coming at the loose ball. Every time. So it's not just an opportunity. It's a non-negotiable. In front, first to move, hunt after the loose ball, and that's why they smashed some contested ball numbers, and that's why they didn't allow the Swans to play. So that was evident for me in the last quarter, but just their 2 stars, Selwood, Dangerfield, being able to do it when it's required, and their defensive group playing as a 6, 7, 8, whatever you want to call them. That was just defensive utopia.
Who did you have as the votes?
It was hard.
Because there was so much. Yeah. There was almost Geelong frivolity going on in there amongst the stuff that you've identified as well.
So I gave the one to Smith. His 7 disposals, 5 score involvements. The Cats only scored 7 times for the quarter. He's involved in 5 of them. So I'm probably harsh on him giving him 1, really. Selwood, for me, it was the 2. 9 disposals, a couple of score involvements, the big goal. He's just there. He's not necessarily contested footy, just smarts. And I thought Warner was the best on ground in the last quarter. 12 disposals, 3 clearances, a couple of goals. And he just, for a team that was going down badly, to be able to fight through, I thought, well, it deserved an elevated placement in the votes.
Yep. So I was looking. I had Smith in consideration. I was trying to get Stanley in. I thought his last quarter was excellent, but you're right, as Warner demanded a vote. So you've given him 3. I've put him on the low end of it.
You're a Cats fan, ultimately, though, Gerard.
Yeah, maybe losing cause and all, but he is in my votes twice, his second quarter and last quarter.
Yeah.
So his reputation is enhanced in a terrible day. I had Selwood in as well, so Selwood polls twice for me, first quarter, last quarter. He was 2. I thought Duncan was the best player in the last quarter.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the whole second half put together, but
I'm harsh on Duncan. I'm probably a bit harsh on him.
Yeah, I thought he was splendid as it went through. So I was 3 Duncan, 2 Selwood, 1 Warner as my last quarter votes.
There's always scope for improvement. About the 27-minute mark of this quarter, in the SEN commentary box, it was the most awkward of hugs.
It was post-game.
Was it post-game? Oh, that was bad. You and Hutto need to review that.
We're fighters, not huggers.
You get everything taken off social media. It was the most awkward hug I've ever seen. You two, let yourselves down there.
That's probably right. That's probably right.
It was a complete performance, though, from the Cats, wasn't it? And I think it's got a great balance. I know we'll get to the full votes in a moment, but the balance of defence versus offence, or attack versus defence, whichever way you want to do it, was just perfect. You know, they're all complementary. We get all of that, but you know, to be able to come up with such a model, Chris Scott's done an amazing job.
3-2-1 for the grand final in your mind.
So equal second, I had Isaac Smith and Tyson Stengel on 5 votes across the 4 quarters, and I had Patrick Dangerfield on 7, winning the Norm Smith, which I don't think is too far off. Jonathan Brown, I agree with Jonathan Brown in that case.
Yeah. So
how'd you go?
I'm not sure mine make a whole lot of sense tallied up.
This is like the season.
I know. I'm sort of quite happy with
that. There's an
that.
irony here.
Like Dangerfield, Selwood's bookends. If I was going to a simple 3-2-1, I would have had Dangerfield, Smith and Stengel for his 4 goals.
Yeah.
Kingy, great means test right throughout the year.
Thanks for the year, G.